According to ABC News, President-elect Donald Trump confirmed that he would declare a national emergency in order to implement his campaign promise of mass deportations of illegal immigrants. Trump replied on social media that such reports of using military assets was indeed true. In his original campaign pledge at a rally at Madison Square Garden, he stated, "On day one, I will launch the largest deportation program in American history to get the criminals out. I will rescue every city and town that has been invaded and conquered, and we will put these vicious and bloodthirsty criminals in jail. Then kick them the hell out of our country as fast as possible." Wow. Well, here comes the commentary part, and I'm afraid I'm going to have a long rant on this one. If you go to Leviticus 19, verses 33 through 34, it states, "When a foreigner resides among you in your land, do not mistreat them. The foreigner residing among you must be treated as a native born. Love them as yourself, for you were foreigners in Egypt. I am the Lord your God." English Standard Version. Now, this is God saying this, okay? You did not have to become a Jew to be a foreigner in Israel. To become a Jew, all you originally needed was a belief in the one true God and circumcision. To become a Christian, the requirement was less physical and was simply, but most importantly, repent and accept Jesus Christ as your Savior. Okay. Now, to become an American, it was much simpler in past times. If you would look at a portion of Emma Lazarus's poem that's on the Statue of Liberty monument, you'll just see how welcome we were of those. When she says, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore, send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." We welcomed immigrants to this land. What happened? In the most egregious use of the U.S. military domestically since the attack on the veterans of World War I on the Capitol Mall, instigated by the President Herbert Hoover, the Republican president-elect intends to use the military for his own political purposes. Republicans are supposed to be for states' rights. However, they have failed miserably under the Trump administration, who would impose his MAGA will on as many states as possible. Governor Walz, the 2024 vice presidential candidate for the Democrats, stated his state's rights position on immigration in 2018 on CBS News. "My position on Minnesota becoming a sanctuary state boils down to who has the responsibility for enforcing immigration law. While Trump supports the states as having a right to determine their own rules on abortion, he refuses to give them the authority over immigration within their own border, except to demand they send all the undocumented aliens packing. Now he wants to use the military. As a military man of 20 years, I can tell you, I find that offensive and quite bordering on an unlawful order by my commander-in-chief, forbidden under post-Vietnam Code of Conduct. I hope the generals remind the commander-in-chief of that code and that such a use of military domestically is an unlawful act, and that they should be bound to not follow such an order. MAGA does not mean Make America Great Again. It's a dog whistle. It means Make America White Again. That explains the support from the KKK, Nazi groups, Proud Boys, etc., other domestic terrorists, of whom Trump said there were good people and patriots. Donald doesn't have a problem with European immigration and sponsored his wives to come to America. He just hates all those others out there. Do you hate immigrants? As a Christian, have you followed God's commandment and loved our immigrants? All of our immigrants? Legal or not? The Bible made no such legal distinction. Trump's own mother was a Scottish immigrant, as was his first wife, Ivana, from Czechoslovakia, and his current wife, our former and soon First Lady, Melania, from Slovenia. Hey, remember the days when former Eastern Europeans, as even naturalized citizens, were suspicious and could not hold certain security clearance? Love your immigrants. Donald does, if they are white and from Europe. Yes, let's make America great again. You know what I mean. Let's go back to the days of my daddy, where he said there was a sign outside the city limits of Coleman, Alabama, stating something like, "Nigger, don't let the sun set on you in Coleman." Or when I received a note scrawled in bad penmanship by mail, when I was the editor of the Independent Press, stating, "Nigger, take this penny and save on welfare. Go back to picking white man's cotton." Signed, KKK. And there was a penny enclosed. Being white myself, I found the letter both amusing yet frightening in the mid-70s. As a boy in the mid-50s in Birmingham, Alabama, I remembered the days of Jim Crow, when my mother admonished me not to drink out of the water fountain labeled color, and she spelled it out, COLORED. Kind of an English lesson, because it was nasty. There was also a time when I went back to the city bus to go to school, and I went to the back side of the bus and sat in the last seat. That's when the bus driver hollered, "You better get back up here, boy, before I tan your hide." People around me were encouraging me to obey him, as they feared they would get in trouble having a white boy back there in the colored section. Yeah, those were the good old days. Ask a large segment of Trump voters pining for their return. For those Republicans who are now revere Ronald Reagan more than their founding president, Abraham Lincoln, and certainly have forgotten the notion of equality for all Americans, I leave you with his final words in his farewell address. And I think this sums up the immigration concept from a true Republican and conservative view much better. This speech was on January 19th, 1989. "Now, tomorrow is a special day for me," Reagan says. "I'm going to receive my gold watch, and since this is the last speech I will give as president, I think it fitting to leave one final thought, an observation about a country which I love. It was stated best in a letter I received not long ago. A man wrote to me and said, 'You can go live in France, but you cannot become a Frenchman. You can go live in Germany or Turkey or Japan, but you cannot become a German, a Turk, or a Japanese. But anyone from any corner of the earth can come to live in America and become an American.'" Yes, the torch of Lady Liberty symbolizes our freedom and represents our heritage, the compact with our parents, our grandparents, and our ancestors. It is that lady who gives us the great and special place in the world, for it is the great life force of each generation of new Americans that guarantees that America's triumph shall continue unsurpassed into the next century and beyond. Other countries may seek to compete with us, but in one vital area is a beacon of freedom and opportunity that draws people of the world. No country on earth comes close. Reagan continues, this, I believe, is one of the most important sources of America's greatness. We lead the world because, unique among nations, we draw our people, our strength, from every country and every corner of the world. And by doing so, we continuously renew and enrich our nation. While other countries cling to the stale past, here in America, we breathe life into dreams. We create the future. The world follows us into tomorrow. Thanks to each wave of new arrivals to this land of opportunity, we're a nation forever young, forever bursting with energy and new ideas, and always on the cutting edge, always leading the world to the next frontier. This quality is vital to our future as a nation. If we ever close the door to new Americans, our leadership in the world would soon be lost. And Reagan keeps going on. A number of years ago, an American student traveling in Europe took an East German ship across the Baltic Sea. One of the ship's crew members from East Germany, a man in his 60s, struck up a conversation with an American student. After a while, the student asked the man how he had learned such good English. And the man explained that he had once lived in America. He said that for over a year he had worked as a farmer in Oklahoma and California, and that he had planted tomatoes and picked ripe melons. It was, the man said, the happiest time of his life. Well, the student, who had seen the awful conditions behind the Iron Curtain, blurted out the question, well, why did you ever leave? I had to, he said. The war ended. The man had been in America as a German prisoner of war. Reagan says, now I don't tell this story to make the case for former POWs. Instead, I tell this story just to remind you of the magical, intoxicating power of America. We may sometimes forget it, but others do not. Even a man from a country at war with the United States, while held here as a prisoner, could fall in love with us. Those who become American citizens love this country even more. And that's why the Statue of Liberty lifts her lamp to welcome them to the golden door. It is bold men and women yearning for freedom and opportunity who leave their homelands and come to a new country to start their lives over. They believe in the American dream, and over they make it come true for themselves, for their children, and for others. They give more than they receive. They labor and succeed, and often they are entrepreneurs. But their greatest contribution is more than economic, because they understand in a special way how glorious it is to be an American. They renew our pride and gratitude in the United States of America, the greatest, freest nation of the world, the last best hope of man on earth. President Ronald Reagan. You see, almost all immigrants are not criminals, rapists, and drain resources that Trump would have you believe. And Fox Network and Newsmax and all the other right-wing crazies on the internet. They contribute to the economy greatly. It is estimated that the cost of such a mass deportation to be almost $1 trillion over a decade. And that is just the upfront cost. The loss of labor and their impact on the economy would be massive, as the construction and agriculture industries would lose at least 1/8 of their workers, and 1 in 14 workers in hospitality, including 30% of workers in major construction trades such as plasterers, roofers, and painters, nearly 28% of graders and sorters of agricultural products, and 1/4 of all housekeeping cleaners. Most Americans are too lazy to do the work or find it beneath their dignity to do that work. There are at least 1 million undocumented immigrant entrepreneurs who generate $27.1 billion in total business income in 2022. Overall, the mass deportation would lead to the loss of 4.2% to 6.8% of the annual U.S. GDP, or $1.1 trillion to $1.7 trillion in 2022 dollars. In comparison, the U.S. GDP shrunk by 4.3% during the Great Recession between 2007 and 2009. The negative impact would be the most significant in California and Texas and Florida, the 3 states that were home to 47.2% of the country's undocumented immigrants in 2022, and where 1 in 20 residents would be deported. That's 5%. It is not a surprise. Oh, this, by the way, these stats came from the American Immigration Council, but they're based on government figures. It is not a surprise when you consider that Trump thought by his voters to be great on the economy and the nation as a whole. It's quite the opposite. True conservatives should be aware of the poor results recorded during his 4-year previous administration. And look out, it's going to be worse in the coming administration. But let me hit the bullet points for you. In Donald Trump's 4 years, the federal debt held by the public went up from $14.4 trillion to $21.6 trillion, or a plus $7.2 trillion. The greatest hike of deficit in American history is owned by Donald Trump. The economy lost 2.7 million jobs in those 4 years. The unemployment rate increased by 1.7% to 6.4%. The trade deficit in goods and services in 2020 was the highest since 2008 and increased in 36.3%. The number of people lacking health insurance rose by 3 million. Illegal immigration increased. The murder rate in his last year rose to the highest level since 1997. Home prices rose 27.5% in just 4 years. That's from factcheck.org. In fact, much of the inflation that was credited to the Biden administration was caused by many of the fiscal policies of the Trump administration. They just came around during Biden's time. Yet Trump used inflation to win the 2024 election when he himself contributed to much of it. You cannot let the rich get out of paying taxes, yet keep spending to the greatest deficit in our nation's history. Any high school economics students can tell you that could cause inflation. Now, Trump, in his xenophobic frenzy, wants to contribute to the loss of 4.2% to 6.8% of the annual U.S. GDP, getting rid of the immigrants. And he once again wants to raise tariffs while reducing taxes for the wealthy, which will cause inflation to go into orbit. Enough said. God commanded us to love immigrants. So how can any good Christian support this attack on millions of people contributing greatly to our American economy? and who just want to be free. God bless. Larry McDowell for Bible College Radio and Christian Press.